I'm live, and I don't know if you can see me because I think you might have had to shut the last room down. So, hello to anybody there. I'll give us a wee second to see if we can catch up. Well, that was a bit of a... we couldn't get our camera or our sound working right there. We had to shut it down and bring it back in. So we're on live, but I don't think anybody can see us or knows that we're here. Let's do that. Let's see. Live stream now. Hello to anybody there. Live stream now. Hello to anybody there. Live stream now. Hello to anybody there. Delay. I don't think we've lost our audience. Oh dear, oh dear. Let's see. Oh, there is Babs. I got you, Dr. Random Circles too. There we are. Hello, Babs. Sorry about that. Right, I'll stop typing, Babs. Can you hear me okay? Can you see me okay? Good, you good now? Ah, there we go. Sorry about that. Technical problems. I don't know how that'll affect the original broadcasting, but it only got started there. So thanks very much for joining us. I don't know if anybody else is going to find us. Oh, and somebody's cooking something nice down in the kitchen here, so I can smell something good coming up. How are you, Babs? Yep. Well, again, I thought last night was a good way to follow on from the video. Sounds fine to me. Thank you. So I just thought actually what you were saying, Babs, funny enough, I don't have much to do myself these days and putting these videos on each night. Some of them are a bit short and we usually get a few questions towards the end of the videos and we tend to get cut off. So I thought this was a good idea, and I thought, yeah, we'll keep this up, see if we can do this each night. So it was a bit hectic, but we're getting used to the technology and the camera and so on and so forth with the YouTube studio. So hopefully it'll keep going okay. So there we go. So these episodes at the minute, Babs, are really just setting up, giving all the sort of background and layers to Samuel Butler and his Erewhon book, which I understand you're having a listen to on LibriVox. Return to the themes in Erewhon. Well, Erewhon's a cracking book. I think it's a good read. It can be a bit. It's hard sometimes to read Victorian literature, I think, for some people, because you have that separation of time and culture. But it's generally the same thing with a lot of literature, I think. But yeah, it's the next episode to follow on from this. Then is into the whole relationship between Erewhon and Dune, and it's one of those things that whenever I was doing the research on this, excuse me, it sent my research into Frank Herbert on a complete curveball. So I was about 3 months in, and I thought it was time to look up this Butlerian jihad thing and see what the reference was. I knew that there was a reference to Butler and Samuel Butler, and upon reading Erewhon and then Erewhon Revisited, I was kind of wow. And the main thing was that up until that point, I thought most of Herbert's ideas were quite original. Story reading isn't so bad. Yeah, some books require a bit of work, but they're worth it, I think. And it was interesting because at the time when I was working on researching, it was Frank Herbert really was the topic of my research. It was looking at the author in general, and I ended up narrowing things down really to the Dune series. But it was to do with his complaint about George Lucas and the whole Star Wars controversy, I suppose, that we discussed in one of the later videos, that Herbert thought that Star Wars had ripped off Dune massively. And I think he had something like, I can't remember exactly how many, but it was something like 18 or 20 points of what he called absolute identity between Star Wars and Dune. And the thing that I got whenever I was reading Erewhon was, in terms of how Frank Herbert thought about it, I found 5 points of absolute identity with Erewhon and Dune, and they're biggies. They're not a casual nod or a mention to another writer. Um, there's an interesting thing about Herbert, I think, sometimes with it when it comes to his ideas. Um, that he doesn't like to admit where he's got some of his ideas from, and he's a wee bit deceptive. Um, Let me see. But if you think about, let me see, a good example of that is his definition of ecology, uh, which is actually a definition of science from Paul Sears. And if you actually check out the ecology episodes where I'm talking about that, you will see what Frank Herbert says does not line up with what Frank Herbert knows, and he's not altogether always honest about where he gets his ideas from. Um, I gotta get the thought of Erewhonian unborn possessing Herbert's ancestral memory, which they lose at birth. The unborn are a fantastic thing in Erewhon, and they are they, it is such a, if we know Butler, it really is one of those indictments on family life in the Victorian era, and the demands placed on the parents by children, but actually by unborn children, and the whole idea of these birth contracts and stuff. Erewhon is funny. It's funny as hell, to be honest. And as I said, if you're well immersed in Victorian, um, literature, and understand Victorian society, it does make a lot more sense. And if you were, say, well versed in the Sherlock Holmes books, excuse me, or even say the Jeremy Brett Sherlock Holmes TV series, which really does immerse you in that kind of Victorian gaslight, if you like. I think Herbert's reference to the butler and jihad is obvious. I agree, Babs, but it's really not what it is. It's so the idea of the Butlerian jihad is in that sense from Butler, but there's so much more that he gets from Erewhon, and it's not that he's plagiarized it, and we'll get to this, but it's that he's used that idea that in Erewhon there's a time frame for what the Dune reader would call the Butlerian jihad, and they give that time frame. And if you work ahead with it from Erewhon and then work back from Dune, you'll find that they line up. And this idea that machines will out-evolve human beings is very much part of the Butlerian jihad, and that it's almost a benevolent kind of. Well, it's suggested in Erewhon that the best outcome would be for man to be like a dog to the machine, like it would be a lovable pet. Kind of makes sense when the born get less dependent as we mature. Yeah. Well, again, he's talking about Victorian society. So I suppose that there's kind of how they make, how the way Victorian society works is quite odd, and even coming out of the Regency period and stuff like that, the sense and sensibilities of the Victorian world are quite odd. We get less dependent as we mature. Do we get less mature as we become more dependent? Yeah, the unborn bit. Yeah, the unborn, and I think that's coming up. There's a particular episode on that where we run through all the points of absolute identity, and there's so much similar to the unborn and the preborn, and that kind of the plaguing of the collective unconscious that Alia has. The idea of the abomination, these children born completely aware. And it's the idea, I suppose, within Erewhon is that there's personalities enshrined in these children, and that they're alien beings as well. That's the other thing. They're the Erewhonians. I think they're from other planets, and they have different forms, and in order for them to take on a form, they have to be born to an Erewhonian couple, and so they start plaguing and harassing these people until they agree to have a kid. But the Erewhonians develop this contract. So it is quite funny, and it says a lot for Samuel Butler's family life is not very happy and jolly, I think, and it's one of those sort of, there are quite a few Samuel Butlers actually. Yeah, it's Alia's Curse, all right, and well, to a degree, Letos and Ganymedes, but we don't really see Ganymede explored too well in Dune. But yeah, so there is a theme of railing against Victorian society in Samuel Butler's work, and I think the interesting thing with Butler, I suppose, is that if you look at Erewhon and look at the later spat with Charles Darwin, what we talk about him saying there in the last episode is that he thought it was a gentle satire, that he was gently poking at Victorian society with this topsy-turvy world, but the ideas of evolution are in it, and he can be quite vicious, Butler, I think, and his kind of spat with Darwin was kind of like a one-way Twitter war, I suppose, from today. And Darwin was kind of afraid of him. I thought just his vehemence. I think Darwin didn't really respond to it out of that. Alia suffered her memories. Yeah, the Baron as well. I think that's the fun thing with Alia, and is the Baron turning up in her other memory. And it's either a mistake by Herbert or something that he didn't work out, or else it's a very deliberate thing to work with, or else she's mad. There's lots of interpretations with Alia, I think. I don't know if you've seen it, Babs. There's a Japanese anime called Hellsing. Spell it for you. There we go, Hellsing. Oh, and at the end of each episode is I'm trying to remember the name of the character. The character, I think, is called Victoria Sears or something like that. Sears Victoria. At the end of each episode of Hellsing, there's a little short cartoon, and it's her struggling with the Baron Harkonnen in her other memory, in very much the same way that Alia does. I think if you might find it quite interesting. They're kind of odd little, what on earth? And if you the Baron looks like the Baron from David Lynch's Dune as well, but they're quite funny. I think in the cartoon, her gun is she's a gigantic gun. It's a Harkonnen gun, I think. So there's might just be Herbert twisting with readers. Yeah, absolutely. I thought it's a pity actually. Ali was a great character, and it could have been more interesting if kept alive for a bit, but made a very good villain as well, and a very sympathetic character and a sympathetic villain too. There we go. If you've got any questions or comments, Babs, I think you're the only person here. I might be wrong. Or if anybody else is watching, has anybody got any comments or questions on Dune? Must just be interesting. The Baron was his exception. Oh, there's Ryan. Hello, Ryan. Made it. Sorry about all that. Quite new to all of this live streaming Q&A stuff, but we're getting there. But I think we are somehow. It's good to see you, sir. The whole thing with the Baron, I think, bringing him back, it's the same with Duncan Idaho, and then I think it became an addictive thing. He kept killing off good characters, and he wants fans like them. And there's a certain element of bringing a fan favorite back, I think, with Duncan Idaho at the very least, and Dune Messiah. How's it going, Ryan? I hope you're keeping well, sir. Ali was tragic, much more so than Leto. Ali has a lot of I suppose there's particular characters that ring strong with her, and there's a hint of there's a few characters maybe in Greek mythology that would line up with her, but she's a hint of I'm trying to think of a bit of Ophelia, to be honest with you. And she is a tragic character. I thought she was played very well, but I'm not sure of the actress's name. But the actress that played Alia in the Dune miniseries, the adult Alia, I thought was really good and did a cracking job of showing the struggle and then making her right at the very end, making her very sympathetic. I thought it was pretty good. I don't know if you guys have seen the Children of Dune TV series, miniseries. Well, Ryan, the whole thing's for a bit of a chat and a bit of crack. So if you have a question for me, fire away. So I'll have a go at anything you like. So the whole point is anything to do with the episode or Dune or science fiction in general. I'm happy to answer your questions. Excuse the mess of the office. Duncan runs close to being an actual hero if Herbert would include one. Well, that's a comment she did. The Duncan being a hero, the whole thing about heroes. I think I was chatting a wee bit about the Greek myths the other day, and particularly the Atreides myth and so on and so forth in the Trojan War. Paul Atreides is a superhero amongst many heroes. So the people that he's surrounded with are of heroic stature. So they're Duncan Idaho and Gurney Halleck in particular. The fact that the men themselves are legendary, if you like, within the Dune universe, is that if they didn't work for Paul Atreides, if you see what I mean, they would still be heroes. And what is a hero we thoroughly have a good go at that one later on. But Duncan does run close to being an actual hero, and I think that's what I was saying the other night. If we got to book 7, would Duncan be your ultimate hero? If Frank Herbert had written it, and we didn't have the Brian Herbert, Kevin J. Anderson books, would Duncan be the ultimate hero? And if that's the case, is he the ultimate warning? Is he? If we have Paul, wow, really dangerous. Leto II, I warned you, even more dangerous. He's dangling Duncan at you for the last book. Duncan is either going to be, I suppose, the hero who's what we want, a real hero, a real hero that can be satisfying in that sense, or if what we were talking about, the continual spiral of action within Dune, the reiteration of action, it could be that Duncan would be, with all the other memory of his own self over thousands of years, be something that's much worse, or he could be the real hero, I suppose. But I think all heroes are pretty much tragic, and funnily enough, I was thinking about this today, Babs. We were talking about Jason and the Argonauts last night, and someone had said that they'd seen the film and that was all they knew of Jason and the Argonauts, and thought it was pretty good, and etc. And there's none of the Greek heroes end well at all. But I was commenting that never really actually explained what happens to Jason from Jason and the Argonauts. But his own people make him disown his wife, who he has 2 children to, and she's Medea. The end of this epic heroic saga ends with his wife murdering his own children, ascending to heaven on a sun chariot, and he basically walks along to the wreck of the Argo, sits down next to it, and says to the ship pretty much, "Nobody loves you, nobody loves me but you," and the Argo falls on his head and kills him. So that's how Jason dies in the Argonautica. Duncan would be the ultimate Kwisatz Haderach in the end, and it seems to me Duncan was set up to lead humanity against the unknown enemy. Yeah, and again, the Kwisatz Haderach is a shortening of the way, a bridge between something old and something new, and the unknown enemy, whatever that might have been, and we have Kralazek, this typhoon struggle at the end of the universe, if you like. I always thought it would be interesting if, I suppose one way of thinking about it is that each golden path, Paul's golden path, is destroyed the minute that Leto begins his. And whenever Leto, the second golden, whoever we're looking for another golden path, I think it's the golden path is any one person's particular vision. Like Hitler's idea of the Third Reich and the Thousand-Year Reich, that's Hitler's golden path. If you see what I mean, the golden path is part of the warning about the hero. It's that it's their monovision, and the only the it seems also that only that hero can really see that vision. So Duncan set lead humanity against the unknown enemy, and I like to think that maybe humanity would lose one of these battles one day. If you see what I mean, it would be just we're always winning at the battle at the end of the universe, and it could be that why not we just get beat. There is something quite downbeat about Dune in terms of how it looks at heroes, and I don't know what you guys think, but my ultimate conclusion about what Herbert thought about heroes was that it was paradoxical, that he thought that they were really dangerous, but he also thought that we needed them, and it's hard to figure out from Dune where he's really going with that, if you know what I mean. I think he's maybe in both camps. Makes sense if the sisters breeding program was never theirs. Yeah, that's that curious little line, isn't it? It's there's a line, Ryan, that we were also talking about previously in one of the appendices of Dune, that basically discusses how inept the Bene Gesserit's handling of the Arrakis affair was, and it's indicative of that they're not aware of this, that, and the other, and that the breeding program isn't theirs, that there's some outside entity, which is probably the unknown enemy. It's mentioned in Dune, and it's in the appendix. A lot of people, I think, don't read the appendices. And if you don't notice it, you'll never really pay attention to it. But it's right there, and there's no payoff on it. By the time you've got to book 6, you're still waiting for that payoff. Where wonder when this mysterious thing is going to turn up. The Tylaxu, or how you spell it, had their own Kwisatz. Yes, indeed, the Kwisatz Haderach breeding program, and that's one of the things from you'll see. Duncan may have been there. You'll see it in the next episode, I think, where. The aspect of these people from Erewhon is there's a race of people in Erewhon who are prescient, and they come before the Erewhonians, and it's implied that they all commit suicide because they can see their own future, and that this is a torment, and something that's sort of backed up by Leto II. And then I think there's a discussion of, as Bab says, the Tyraxu have a Kwisatz Haderach, but if we read in, I'm not sure which book, I think it's in Dune Messiah, but that Kwisatz Haderach commits suicide. And that's the problem that they have. Duncan may have been there. Hello, Randomity. I believe that Herbert handled the literary AI dilemma with the Butlerian Jihad, and that he wouldn't have ended his series with the unknown enemy being thinking machines. Consider that Duncan was a weapon against the honoured Matres. Yeah, I think that's the general his particular thing I think is that he can resist, and I believe if going back to those Bene Gesserit books, he can sexually imprint the Bene Gesserit, or the honoured Matres. The literary AI dilemma, randomity with the Butlerian Jihad. Yeah, it's that he wouldn't have ended his series with the unknown enemy being thinking machines. It could be too obvious. I think we were also talking about this the other night, that there's 3 or 4 possibilities of what the unknown enemy is or are, and that if again, I suppose we have the Kevin J. Anderson, Brian Herbert answers to that, I suppose. But we were saying, I suppose if 10 people had Frank Herbert's notes, 10 different authors would produce 10 different books. But I suppose the interesting thing is, absolutely, it could well not be the AI, the artificial intelligence, the thinking machines, or whatever that kind of spectre was. But it's also equally viable with the face dancers, and with there's even I think we were talking about the whole Marty and Daniel thing, possibly being Frank and Bev. You know, and that there's a kind of I think I mentioned that there's a play kind of called Rosencrantz and Guildenstern is dead, or dead, sorry, and it's about where one of the characters realizes that they're a character in a play, I suppose. So I like to speculate, as I was saying, randomity, and I've always thought that I think I was saying the other day that I really enjoyed the fact that whenever I read Dune, they were unfinished and there were no answers, and that it's good fun to think about all of these options, and especially if you reread Dune, um, which I've had to do quite a few times, and something that I've discovered is if you look at Dune in any one way, the whole series reads quite differently, and I had to sort of restart each time I looked at the major themes. So the evolution as the one thread that runs strongest all the way through all six books. Looking at it that one way, and then resetting myself to look at the approach to the hero, how it's tied to evolution, and then the ecology thing. They're different threads, and you can read Dune from in quite different ways and get sort of almost different answers because you're paying attention more to certain things than to others. Um, which is, I suppose, a good point whenever if you're trying to study Dune in any way. It's massive. Um, Consider Duncan was a weapon against the other batteries, absolutely. How that Leto also referred to them as unknown, does it imply Leto's prescience failed him, or Leto chose not to reveal them? Oh, I mean, it's been a wee while since I've read God Emperor of Dune, Babs, but there are blind spots to Leto's prescience, I think. Failed him, or Leto chose not to reveal them, or maybe that he has knowledge of it, and it's part of it. I don't know that the prescience is quite tricky. It's within the Dune series. Sometimes it doesn't quite make sense. And let me see, does it imply Leto's prescience failed him, or Leto chose not to reveal them? Again, I think there's something with. I would have to reread Dune, God Emperor of Dune, but I think that Leto II is aware of something else going on. In the background, but it's been a good while since I've read that book. I'm rereading the first Dune book at the minute, and I think I said the other week I was reading it, my glasses broke while I was reading it, and I had to go buy some new glasses. Also referred to them as the unknown, and it's the unknown enemy. It's if you think about a lot of these TV shows have a build up these days to an unknown enemy or some shadowy enemy that's always going to come out. I mean, everybody does it these days, don't they? The kind of evolution of humanity involves machines that Herbert included. Let's see, the kind of evolution that humanity involves machines that Herbert included it. I think that Butler's idea is, to quote Samuel Butler, man is a machinate animal. I think that very much the point of this evolutionary chapter, if you look at it, is that we look at it's not just people that evolve, it's machines as well. And how the machines evolve affect how people evolve affects how our machinery evolves. So the evolution of machinery and humanity, I suppose, in Dune is fundamentally linked. Excuse me. And the perfect face dancers would be the ideal foil for Duncan. If Leto's plan was the continuation, allowing them to not reveal it would make them less able to continue. Not the breeding program isn't Bene Gesserit, it's that they have been manipulated, most likely by the collective unconscious. That's an interesting idea. Says Dima Suki. Yeah, so is that even possible that then Daniel and Marty are possibly some sort of male and female representation of the ultimate lines of male and female other memory? I wonder, is that what you mean? But that sounds pretty interesting. I have not thought about that. Leader's plan is the continuation of humanity, then to not reveal it would make them less able to continue. Well, my only thing about them that Leto II is that if Paul's golden path ends with him, Surely Leto II's golden path might end with him as well. I mean, would it continue at all? It's kind of what I was saying about the idea that if you think about, particularly dictators and stuff setting up like a kind of imperialist vision, that the vision isn't, it's a strange thing. The golden path, I'm not too sure is an absolute sort of prescient thing. I think it is part of the warning about heroes. But our unknown hero, our unknown creatures from the unknown enemy has become, almost every show's got one these days. And there are science fiction and fantasy shows, something returning from the darkness. It's very much a dominant trope in this kind of fiction, and it's stock to not reveal your villain too much, I think, which I don't think is always a good idea. The three of them basically possess the same power. I mean, right. Oops, right. So it's not that the reading program isn't Bene Gesserit's, that they've been manipulated, most likely by the collective unconscious. And then Ryan says the three of them basically possess the same power. So why did the Thylaxu Kwisatz Haderach kill himself, as indicated by Skytail? Well, I think we were saying that there's behave, ladies. Sorry, that's my dog's going off in the background there. Murray and Daniel are archetypes of the male and female. I like the idea of it being Herbert inserting himself in Bev. Yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting. That's the same part. The thing about the Kwisatz Haderach, the Thylaxu Kwisatz Haderach, I think we just mentioned a wee bit earlier, was I think very much linked to that. There's a particular passage in Erewhon which talks about the race of the pre-Erebonians who have prescience, and they all kill themselves within 6 months because it's just too much. Duncan doesn't possess prescience, no, but I suppose at the point where I think we were seeing at the end of chapter House Tunes, I think we were waiting for Duncan to have a crisis point and evolve again, possibly. But the thing with Duncan is that I suppose Duncan represents a different. We have an episode on the last final Duncan Idaho Gola, and the idea is that his collective unconscious is personal from, I suppose, from his life at the point in the first Dune novel. So with all his deaths and reincarnations, at the point where he becomes a Kwisatz Haderach, my understanding is his other memory is of his own lives rather than say them. Though you'd think it would actually include the male line as well. And the female line, if that's what a Kwisatz Haderach was. Thylaxu and Kwisatz Haderach kill themselves for the same reason, accurate, suffering their other memories. Yes, it's interesting. If the idea of Abraxas, isn't it? I think that Leto II talks a lot about this. It's and if you apply it to theological discussions of the nature of any kind of divinity, that if a God is all powerful, so if a God is omniscient, omnipresent, and omnipotent, what the heck is the point of doing anything or being anything? Because you know everything before it happens. You are everything, and you're all just what a. So could only probably such an idea be created by a human, I think. Book says that they become opposite of what they've been, or something surely similar. Being an abomination could do that too. Yeah. So Leto II, I suppose, and if you have a wee look in when we're talking about Leto at some point, I've put in I think it's a 3rd century Abraxas coin, which you'll see the reverse and obverse of. You'll see very much an image of this Abraxas deity that looks very much like Leto II. So it's a worm, pretty much with a man's face and a lion's head. And that idea is that if you were that type of God, if you were God, that God doesn't create human beings for right or wrong or good or evil. It's simply entertain me, show me something new, which is an interesting concept. But there's a lot of that in God Emperor of Dune. The omni-god is dilly and illogical. Yeah. Well, I suppose that's the interesting thing about it. There are different interpretations of what a deity is, but the all-knowing, all-seeing, all-pervading one is yeah, there are plenty of deities other than Yahweh. In fact, all the Abrahamic ones are the same. El, if you want to give him a good name. um, and yeah, I think there's a lot of religions. I think a lot of people think that Dune maybe speaks positively towards some religious ideas, but I think it's pointing out to people that all of them are pretty much control systems of some kind or another. I think we were talking a wee bit about the ancient world and so on. If you read The Republic by Plato, it basically it's a bit of an eye opener if you think of when it was written. But there's a good discussion in there of the absolute fact that gods aren't real; they don't exist. But we can use religion to control the population, and that's why we should hang on to it. Omnipotence is limited to the realm. Right, that's why I said omni. Omni God, all. Yeah, they're all the alls, all the omnis. Has anybody got any other questions for me? Or any comments on the video today or anything like that they'd like to ask? Fire away, please. I'll use this opportunity to get some fluids. Let's take cheers, Maz. Hello, nice to see you. Oh, by the way, folks, I'll just say this. Sometimes when my little mind wanders and stuff, if I don't actually answer your question properly, give me a wee nudge, because I can. My head is a one of those. I compartmentalize a lot of things and have to go wandering to remember stuff. Religion, myth are a favorite to discuss. Absolutely. Mythology is fantastic. I love mythology. And Dune is absolutely loaded with it. It's one of the major things that attract me to the book, I suppose. And how it portrays religion. Funnily enough, there's a few arguments and a few interesting things about Dune over the years, and that have been controversial. And you might want to have a look at Orson Scott Card wrote an article piece. And I can't remember the name of it, but it's to do with whether Osama bin Laden had read Dune. I came across it quite early on in my research. It's one of those things that was quite bizarre, and that there was actually a follow-up. I remember reading some article in the papers about that. I suppose I think it was something to do with after Osama bin Laden had been killed, they were actually looking to see was there a copy of Dune in there, and I think that was quite a little bizarre blip in the history of the Dune series, and some of the, I suppose, controversies about it. Which is I'm going to do a wee video actually about that. It's quite an interesting thing. Do you think Brian Herbert had a good relationship with his dad? I feel the ending was not close to what Frank intended, and they just tried to profit from the saga. Well, I'd never met Brian Herbert. I sent my PhD to him years ago. I tried to get in touch with him again a wee while back, but everyone that I've ever tried to, pardon me, introduce this work to has basically not responded back. I got one quite nasty email back from someone in Hollywood about 11 years ago. Brian Herbert, I think, has had a complicated relationship with his father. I've read the biography and enjoyed it very much. And it's a personal biography of his father. And I think there were issues in the family, and I think there's a right kind of balance in it. I don't think he puts his father on a pedestal too much, and I suppose fathers and sons all have their relationships. Frank Herbert worked with his son, and they have a man of two worlds, for example, and I suppose helped him along with his craft, but they wrote books together. And I think the ending was not close to what Frank intended. I'm honestly not sure. But do I think that that he just intended to, he just tried to profit from it. I think that's part of the business of being a writer, and I don't think Frank would have hated his son for trying to make a living from selling science fiction books, because Frank's early life as a science fiction writer was a struggle, as it is for almost anybody who wants to try and get into that kind of craft. And it was Bev that really kept the family going and supported financially at that point. So I think I will say this: I think Frank Herbert is very much, as much as he's into the ecological, environmental, and all of this stuff, he's very much an American capitalist of the of the times. I think, you know, he needs to earn a living, and money buys you things, and selling books is all about what you want to do. If as you're an author, you want to get your story out there. So I don't think it was a deliberate, I'm just gonna, you know, milk this, and I think there's effort and work in it, you know, and they, regardless of what you might think of the stories, these people have to put time in and write them, and you know, I don't think they could ever satisfy all of the Frank Herbert readers, and I think that I think the best thing is, I suppose, he's done a lot to keep the franchise alive, but um, it's, again, we talked about this, the authorial voice doesn't sound right, and it doesn't quite come across the same way. Okay, okay. Let's see. Give us a wee second. I'll just catch up with some of these messages here. Do you think? I got the Dune very recently. Finished all Frank's books. I did not see the sexual plots coming. What happened there? And Brennan really inherited the legacy and peels in the shadow of his father's writing talent. He's inherited his legacy, and I would say yes, the talent is not the same, but it's certainly, I don't think he's had any attempt at being disrespectful to his father in any way. I don't, but I do think his relationship with his dad's complicated. But that my knowledge of that is really based on his book. So and I think if you're a Frank Herbert fan, it's called Dreamer. Is it called Dreamer of Dune? Let me see. Is it here somewhere? I think it's called Dreamer of Dune. Frank Herbert's, the biography of Frank Herbert by Brian Herbert, is a really good read, and it will give you a lot of insight into Frank. Um, Romero Solari says you did not see the sexual plot points coming. What happened there? The last two books are, if you're trying to describe them, some of the things that are going on in those books to a non-Dune reader, and even to a Dune reader up to that point, they're a bit crazy. And but science fiction's full of. I think I was saying I might do a video on sex and science fiction, which can be quite funny and quite bizarre. Um, Building our legacies belong to our children. As a dad, I think he'd be okay with Brian going further with it. Perhaps I agree. You want the best for your children. I think Frank would be happy for Brian, and you know, there he is on the set of the films and stuff like that. It goes well. I'm personally, I don't know. I personally like it when a series gets put to bed, I suppose. I think I was discussing that with with fantasy literature. A lot of these books can go on and on and on, and they become a little bit diluted over time. And I think also whenever you start to try and write prequels and fit things into different things, it's happened. It causes issues, and because you have to be so careful. Um, what shade of grey is bedding a futon? I'm not sure what you mean by that randomity, but I'm getting a sense of really how the legacy peels in the shadow of his father's writing. Shade of bedding a futon. Sexual pulse. You'll have to fill me in on that if that's a reference to something randomity. I'm not remembering it rightly. My old fuzzy brain. But I read the end of the Dune books. They were satisfactory, and it kind of went where I thought it would go with the narrative that was set up. And then I did have a wee go at, as I said, the first three family books, if you like, the House of Atreides, House Harkonnen, House Carino, and I thought I was kind of done with that at that point, because I did see it looking like very much a chain of Dune has kind of become a mass-produced series. And if you think that it took Frank Herbert 5 years to churn out Dune, but I think my understanding is based on looking at them on Twitter, is that Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson turned out a Dune novel in 30 days, which is impressive. I was wondering if you're going 50 Shades there, but due to the bizarre sexual plots. Thank you for clearing that up, randomity. Yeah, I don't know. There's a body of science fiction that comes out of the 60s and 70s, I suppose, that but we've been pushing up towards the 80s with this stuff that yeah, sex and science fiction gets a bit bizarre. Wasn't there a scene with Logno and another HM betting a futon? Oh, is this the perversions of the honored matres? Yeah, quite likely. I don't know. You were the fandom is currently very obsessed with the word beef spelling found in beef spelling found in Children of Dune. It always cracks me up. I must look that up for context to get the rest of the sentence, but it sounds fun. Yeah, there's a few kind of anachronistic words in Dune, and I think he does play with a lot of words, mixes up the cultures, I suppose. What do you think about Herbert's idea about charismatic leaders? Says Firkin Selick. We know Herbert had read about Hitler, Stalin, and other 21st leaders. I wonder what Herbert would have thought if he read about Ataturk. Ataturk, father of the Turks. Are you wool gathering, Maneo? Very good. I think that's a good question, Fergus. Wonder what Herbert would have thought if he'd read about that, or other. If you've got 21st century leaders, if you look at the videos that we've done. Again, I don't know. I think ultimately Herbert's attitude to the hero, what is schizophrenic, and he presents him. He studied the hero in a very particular way, whereas there's other ways of looking at heroes, I suppose. It's the amplified hero as well. It's not just someone who's heroic. It's that they've got a particular level of charisma or way of interacting. So Kennedy was his favorite in regards to that. And he points out Stalin and Churchill again, and so on and so forth. So they're all leaders. They're not from any particular thing, but it's to do. It's not as much to do with the leader itself. It's what the people around them will do, and the systems and attachments and control of that person. So it very much depends on, and we have heroes very much different types of heroes. We have religious heroes, cultural heroes, political heroes, military heroes, if there's such a thing. But the word hero in particular isn't a thing that it really has got a fundamental association to do with death. And the word hero is a word that's bandied in the press a lot today for pretty much anyone and everything. But generally, within the old sense, the heroes are a bit like your Kwisatz Haderach. There's a fundamental bridge, particularly between the tragic and the epic hero, like the King Arthur myth. So the thing that I think Herbert's always gone on about, it's not just the hero, but it's the people around them. And after the hero has gone, the systems that the people have developed are still there, and continue to elevate. And once the person's gone, then that's the point where you can enshrine them and do whatever you like to their personality, because they're not around to correct you. In terms of cultural and political heroes, that I would absolutely think that Herbert definitely would have read about Ataturk. And again, we have attitudes. Not all our heroes are bad. Not all our heroes are good. And it's this amplification. So just rereading your question just to make sure I've answered it, Firkin. I wonder what Herbert would have thought. I think he'd absolutely be absorbed in people like Ataturk, and but the cultural heroes. Myself, here we have the example of I suppose if you look at the hero chapter, you'll see I've put in a few people into it. and we put Trump in there, but I've put Ian Paisley in from Northern Ireland, who's a was a religious political leader here, and absolute, you know, uh, so I think it always depends, and everyone's hero is another person's villain. Um, not to speak ill of attitude or anything like that, just in leadership in general, and the world has many different types of leaders, and many of them are not good, but we do have a few enlightened leaders out there. And I think that I do know that Herbert was a speechwriter for various political individuals, and he was actually quite proud of the fact that none of them that he worked for ever got into office. So I'd say this, Firkin, his attitude to leaders, charismatic leaders, and uh, is complicated, but it's also shaped by the fact that we just emerged out of World War II, and that massive slaughter, I think, very much informs Herbert's attitude to Paul Atreides and then Toledo II as well. First three books were cautionary tales of charismatic leaders, says Rondoni. Paul mentioned Hitler to Stilgar, who of course didn't know who he was. Yes, and then he tells Stilgar how many people that Hitler killed, and Stilgar's impressed. Or is it he's not impressed? Is it because Paul has killed many, many more? And the point, I think, with that conversation, randomity, is Paul is educating Stilgar that he kills the same way that Hitler killed, not personally. He doesn't kill every one of these millions and millions of people. It's through his legions. And that's this part, that particular conversation's all about educating Stilgar. And I think within the first three books, really, your key to your insight, your major insight into Paul, is through Stilgar. Especially in Dune Messiah and especially in Dune Messiah, I think Stilgar is a very, very important character. First three books, cautionary tales of charismatic leaders. So is God Emperor, is he not charismatic? Because I just think he is the, and again, if you think, I will say this. You're welcome, Firkin. I hope it was a good answer. I hope it answered things for you. If you think about the Dune universe, I'll tell you something, that part of our entrancement or our enchantment with the hero is this: we all forget about the little people, and the common man and the fifer likes. And you have to understand that as much as the enjoyment of the heroic narrative, that we're actually witnessing events through in the Dune series from the future. They're being told from a historical perspective through documents at the beginning of each chapter. The point is, all the little people die. And if you were in Frank Herbert's universe, you'd probably be dead. You're nothing to these people. And that is the noble houses. There is an elitism and that kind of feudal structure to the universe. But if you understand that if Leto II withholds melange, melange is fatal if you have withdrawal, then there's an awful lot of people die just from that. And the noble houses and the slaughter fest that goes on really within the Dune series, it's all conducted over just by a few people. But it's the little people that you never really see, I suppose. And the closest kind of thing that you have to the regular folk of Dune, I suppose, are the Fremen. Is there a Fremen tradition of naming your second son as your first if he dies before the second is born? I'm asking because of the two Letos. Leto ruled by establishing himself as a deity, so he wasn't adored like Paul, who was received as a Messiah, but became God himself. So I don't know. Well, not too sure what you mean there, Randomity, but aren't you supposed to adore a god? Maybe they're just terrified of him. He is the ultimate predator. Sorry, Guillermo. Is there a Fremen tradition? I'm not too sure about that question. Naming your second son as your first if he dies before the second is born. I'm asking because of the two Letos. Leto the second Leto, I suppose, dies in Dune, and it's that moment we were talking about in mythology to do with the Atreides, the sacrifice of Aulis, and so Leto there's a speech where Leto II is talking, and he explains to, I think it's Farad'n, that he is not the second Leto. So not quite sure why. I actually thought that the baby Leto, the second Leto that's the baby, isn't called Leto II because he doesn't rule, and I thought that was why. Paul's first son who died was named Leto. That's the one we're talking about. Yes. So he doesn't rule. So that's why I think he's not Leto II. If you see what I mean, and why Leto III is the third person with that name, but he rules, and that's why he's Leto II. I think that's the way it's meant to be. Hope that answers your question. I'm not all knowing about Dune, and I've looked at it in a very particular set of ways, I suppose. And there are other ways of approaching the Dune series. So I'm doing my best a lot of this time to fish stuff out of my memory from about 10 years ago. And I figured it was kind of very much similar to, if you do a PhD, you have to go in and defend it, which is basically what I'm sort of doing now. Take questions and do your best to answer anything you can on it. So if you've anybody else got any other questions, fire away. I always find it strange how Paul's first son was so little mentioned afterwards. I think that's part of the trick, Babs. It's the one thing that makes you go, whoa, hang on, about Paul Atreides, and it's not. It doesn't really. Let's gloss over that and move on. A lot of people talk about being tricked. That the first book of Dune is a trick, but the key to his character is there, I think. And how would I put this? I suppose most people say that the realization of the inversion of the heroic theme begins pretty much with the conversation that we were just talking about there a wee bit. Let me just see who was. Oh, I'll not do that again, actually. But the conversation about let me see. I've lost my train of thought. Can somebody remind me what I was just saying there a wee second ago, very quickly? I'll probably remember myself. Sorry. There we go. Apologies. It's the conversation with Stilgar that Paul has about Hitler and how many people that Paul has killed, I think. And it's the whole point is, oh my goodness, I thought this guy was fantastic. I thought this guy was a hero, an amazing hero, and all of the heroic journey that we've kind of rooted for Paul gets a real smack in the face, literally in the first couple of pages of Dune Messiah. But the baby is the baby Leto a weak plot device, as he's killed off before his characters even develop? Well, that's what we were talking about the other night, randomly. It's to do with the Atreides myth, and it's to do with the ships at Aulis, what's called the sacrifice at Aulis. And if you read that section of Dune, absolutely, we don't really get to see this character. The baby's kind of killed off screen, but it's about Paul cannot and will not act, and it's this, he will not move forward with his men, and he's waiting for this moment to happen. And it's the moment where he knows that Leto, the baby Leto, has been killed. Now, it's all to do with the sacrifice of the parallel between Paul Atreides and Agamemnon. Here is all to do with this myth, and it's that the 1,000 ships of the Greeks during the Trojan War cannot sail until Agamemnon sacrifices his daughter Iphigenia. So the storm is fundamentally, if you understand the myth, the storm and the winds and the sacrifice, it's that he is prescient, he can save his child, and he doesn't. And that's the bit where you should realize in Dune that this isn't a nice person. And granted, they're a pretty vicious bunch, Paul and the Fremen and so on, but there's something not quite right. Well, not with my moral sensibilities anyway. And I suppose with Paul Atreides is the excuse is always the golden path. I think Paul's first one was a little nod to the tragedy of the Greek myths and Atreides, absolutely. Is the baby Leto a weak plot? So I think what you were saying, randomly, just to finish that, was it a weak plot point? I think not. I think it's a very subtle, and it's meant to just go right by you. And if you notice it, you should go, huh? What is, and if we understand Paul's abilities and what it really should make us doubt this man entirely. Um, Paul's first son was, yeah, as we were saying, that the whole family Atreides myth is thoroughly linked into Greek mythology and to Greek history. And so, like in Macbeth, where Macduff's son is murdered by Macbeth's henchman. Excuse me. Yeah, interesting you say that. I suppose there's a bit of myth involved with Macbeth, and it's. I think we also mentioned this the other night. Hello, VT. Good to see you. To do with literature that's kind of designed to show a genealogical descent to someone. So James I, James VI of England and Scotland, we have Shakespeare's Macbeth and King Lear are both designed to show that he's descended from a Scottish king and are actually an Irish king is Lear, but he's on the English king list, the king list of Britain. So it's a common thing. Herbert does it with the Atreides to give them a direct historical. The whole point is they're meant to have this long, long, long genetic history all the way back to the Trojan War and further. And that's the whole point of the Atreides and their very particular name. And the myth's very embedded within the Dune series, and particularly the curse of the House of Atreus and so on. Excuse me. Do 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 do. So yeah, there's quite a bit. I'm trying to remember the name of the artist, but there's a painting of the sacrifice of Iphigenia at Aulis. It's in my videos, but if you look it up on Wikipedia, and you'll see the gods standing by with the sacred deer to swap over. But this is the event that the Trojan War cannot begin. And there's different sort of relations with the Atreides family. There's different characters within it, I suppose, and they're a little bit overlaid on top of mostly Paul. To be honest with you, um, you get quite a lot of other nods to Greek mythology and we'll see this in the hero chapter. There, Leto, for example, as the mother of Apollo and Artemis, and you get that gender inversion within Dune as well, where, for example, Leto is a name of a female goddess. We have the Reverend Mother Gaius Helen Mohiam. So we have a Greek name there, Greek goddess. Gaius is the first name of Gaius Julius Caesar, or Gaius Julius Kaiser, if you want to pronounce it right. So there's a lot of the Greek and Roman world, but it's also partly to do with the monomyth and the hero. I suppose the work on heroes that Herbert studied, I suppose, and a lot of it is what I would argue is that there's a Jungian thread within the heroic approach, I suppose, and there's quite a bit of iconotropy within the psychological and psychoanalytical world, shall we say. Has anyone got any other questions? I mean, has any? I take it we're still a group of people who haven't seen the film. Hmm. So yeah, I was going to say that the Samuel Butler Zero one is worth a read. It's a bit of an old-fashioned book. I think it's about 1872 it came out. And there's quite a bit of Dune in there. As Macbeth is a tragic hero, Paul is also aware of his fate, yet continues on. The historical Macbeth's quite different. As Macbeth's a tragic hero, Paul is also aware of his fate, yet continues on. The thing that works against Macbeth is the supernatural world and fates. And I'll give you one for you if you like randomity. There are no witches in Macbeth. the three sisters, the three weird sisters, are the three fates, and the witch one, witch two, and witch three are stage directions. So they never refer to themselves as witches once, and their goddess is Hecate, and how they refer to themselves is the weird sisters, but they are weird being fate. If I don't know if anybody's noticed my title card at the beginning, and if anybody gets the reference, but it says the Weird of the Red Russ Productions present. Does anybody get the reference, by the way? We were talking to Babs earlier, saying that we have got lots of wee hidden jokes and references in our work, but most people don't seem to spot them. The Weird of the Red Russ is a reference to a book. And by the way, my name's Russell, so I'm the Red Russ. It's nice to meet you. Maybe not, I suppose. The Weird of the White Wolf is a Michael Moorcock Elric story. But the weird is to do with fate, and the three witches in Macbeth are Clotho, Atropos, and Clatisis. Is that their names? So they are the fates, and the whole thing of the supernatural element in Macbeth is really interesting, I think. Supernatural horror, but yet it does much to it sort of makes a villain out of Macbeth, because again the point is we don't want to show a line of lineage to Macbeth, we want to show a line of lineage to Banquo. But Virgil's Aeneid does the same thing for Augustus Caesar. And yeah, Macbeth's a tragic hero, but he's a bit of a villain too. And I have to say, I think Lady Macbeth's as much a tragic hero and as much a villain there too. Macbeth is a tragic. He continues on. The Fremen refer to the weirding ways of the BG. Yes, Bene Gesserit, the weirding, the fateful ways, possibly. Weird's one of the. I like the word weird. It's very good weird. Very good weird word. Paul is aware of his fate, yet continues on the golden path, randomity. But then, isn't it the whole point about his failure as a hero? Or is it actually the thing that makes him a hero, is that he abandons the golden path? Pardon me. And I've never quite because I think the whole point with Paul is to present him as a failed messiah, as a failed hero. He turns away from the golden path, which makes all of his actions kind of whatever's happened to get them there. It's I don't know. He's a very complicated character, Paul Atreides, and I find him much more sympathetic in actually in Dune Messiah and Children of Dune. Whereas I simply put in Dune, I think he's much more intriguing, and we're getting involved in that in the mistake of the hero, you know. I don't know if you've ever seen it, Randomity. Is it Throne of Blood? Is the Akira Kurosawa version of Macbeth, and it's fantastic, and it's a really good. It gives that level of the supernatural, but it is really good. See, those given a prescient prophecy have no free will to do otherwise. There's wee things about the guilds kind of and their prescience again in the appendices, that there's all sorts of people that have limited prescience, and I think the main reason that you're talking about the prophecy have no free will to do otherwise is why don't the guild interfere in the nexus that they can see coming that probably involves the Kwisatz Haderach. And it's because I think they're aware that no matter what, if they do anything, it makes it really bad. So the guild tend to just stand back. But there's a level of prescience there. Prescience is an interesting thing, I suppose. But and I think the way Herbert handles it in the story is that for you, the reader, you're prescient as you read Dune. You're looking back on the events, but you're getting little pieces of foreknowledge through the histories and biographies and hagiographies, and so you know who's going to betray, the Atreides. You're prescient to the events as the story moves forward. Although you don't see everything, you get snapshots, and I think it's a really good way of telling a story and moving the narrative forward. It's particularly part of, I think, Frank Herbert's style. I think is that third person omniscient um, narrator. And again, that's part of the narration. And you'll find, I think if anybody's ever looked at that article, the Orson Scott Card article about Dune and the one we were mentioned earlier, the the Osama bin Laden thing, he refers to Frank Herbert's style. It's one of these things where another author puts down another author's style, going, I don't write like that. What? And but he kind of also says that it actually happens to work really, really well. So I don't know. It's one of those things that maybe Frank Herbert's particularly good at. But hey, oh, the house is woken up a bit here. How are we doing, folks? I'll tell you what. We'll go for another 15 minutes if you like, and we'll shut ourselves down at midnight. So if you've got any last week questions, fire them away, and we'll see what we can do. I hope I'm not boring you too much, folks. Space and Guild after Messiah really seems to take the sit back and judge on your info type of approach. I really don't want to interact remotely with prescient beings until God Emperor. Random, using weirding as a synonym for witchy. Weird is one of those. There's lots of good words like that in the English language, but we have good few of them over here in Ireland. Fey is a good one, for example. Eldritch, weird, uncanny. My personal favorite is rum. If something's a bit odd, a bit strange, it's a bit rum. But a bit weird too, yeah. Using weirding as a synonym for witchy. Well, I think there's a lot of wordplay in Dune. Again, with characters, all sorts of things. Leto sought to have save humankind from prescience by breeding someone who couldn't be seen by it. Yeah, randomly, we're going to get along to that, because we were talking about how technology evolves because of human evolution, and then how humans and machine evolution both affect each other. And of course, the problem is, how do you move against someone who's omniscient? So that's the thing. Being a god is pretty much, how do you hide something from a god? And if you're truly omniscient, then you can't. Yes, Siona, and we have also that development of the no ships and the no technology, which is suggestive that they're kind of anti. I always thought particularly that they're anti-entropic machines. Yeah, the weirding way is the Bene Gesserit's martial art, and which is, I think, is part of their own mythos that they create around themselves. That the Bene Gesserit absolutely pretend to be something they're not, and they cultivate that, which is the Bene Gesserit and the Bene Tleilax are almost well, they're very good mirrors of each other, but the Bene Tleilax do the same thing. In the use of the word, the dirty Tleilaxi, the disgusting Tleilaxi, the vile Tleilaxi, is the way it's in the book. And all of these terms are put out there by the Tleilaxi themselves. It's what they want people to think. And I totally think that's the same with the Bene Gesserit. They want to create this, they sow myths and stories for their own purposes. Really, it's the missionary protective, as the clues in the name. It's to protect their members when they happen to land on any particular planet. That there's a set of narratives and stories that they can, kick in and go, you're the chosen one they talked about. Come and let us feed you and look after you. So the missionary protective is very much a defense mechanism for the Bene Gesserit, but they very much use that kind of mythology, I suppose, and the sense that they have got these certain powers and they can tell the truth, and etc. It creates an air of mystique, and it's part of a defense. I think almost every group within the Dune universe has got its thing in that sense for politicking. That there are always plans within plans within plans, and very much a part of that cyclical motif. But I really enjoy the just been reading the bit where I'm at in Dune is just the bit where Jessica's been captured, and she's trying to figure out, how is a Bene Gesserit being captured? And we go into it, but the going through the process of her being captured, calming her mind, counting back to see how long she's been unconscious. The whole process of these abilities. It's a lot of their abilities would seem like magic to anyone who doesn't really know much about them, and I suppose that's what Arthur C. Clarke says about the difference. But any sufficiently advanced technology is hard to discern from magic. But I think the Bene Gesserit are always a power play manipulators. They're power behind the throne, and they understand that the reason why they're behind the throne is they understand that if you're on the throne, you can get smacked, and as long as they never sit there, they'll never get smacked too hard, I think, and that's a fundamental part of their. They're very much in control of things. So yeah, the weird with the White Wolf is that we reference to one of the Elric books. I believe that the missionary protectors put in place on various words to pave the way for the Bene Gesserit. Kwisatz Haderach worked too well on Arrakis. Oh, absolutely. Sorry, it's not saying that wasn't what it's for as well. The Kwisatz Haderach is one of their set of myths, and it's I get the impression that the Kwisatz Haderach myth is sown on more than one planet, but it tends to be that I think that the Bene Gesserit certainly think that certain conditions must be available or arise for the creation of a Kwisatz Haderach, but it certainly seems that I think isn't it where Jessica realizes that myth is here on Arrakis, and I think she says, "Gods, this must be a hell world," or something to that effect. So I think there's a point where I think the missionary protectivist sows the Kwisatz Haderach set of myths on many planets, but tends to be harsh ones because I think ultimately they're not too sure where their Kwisatz Haderach is going to come from, or flies about there. So, but it is absolutely a part of the missionary protective. And we always have to assume that, of course, that it's most likely going to be a Bene Gesserit that's going to give birth to a Kwisatz Haderach, or the as part of their breeding program anyway. But actually, thinking about that made me wonder: was the Kwisatz Haderach myth sown on Salusa Secundus, which is what a poser for is. I don't know if anybody what you might think of that, because the Salusa Secundus is one of the stops for the Fremen, isn't it? It's as the Zen Sunni warriors, they stayed there for a while before heading on to Arrakis. Missionary Protective is a religion used to control humanity. Well, myths and legends are quite interesting in how they control people. It's interesting if you can look at mythology, how it develops over a long period of time. So some of you were asking me about epics and sagas the other night, and I think I was discussing the matter of Britain. And matter of Britain's all the stories to do with King Arthur, and you can arguably say that they begin around the 6th century and you can say that they're still going on today. But at certain points, there's certain changes in history and time and authorship of some of these myths. So you can get the Welsh myths of King Arthur and English ones and Anglo-Saxon ones. But at a certain point, the Normans invade Britain and we get the Battle of Hastings in 1066 and so on. You get changes in the knights of King Arthur. And suddenly, the best knight in the world in this very English set of myths is a French guy called Lancelot du Lac. And mythology has been myths and legends are very much used for control, propaganda, and they're fundamentally a part of all religions. I'd almost argue that religions probably develop out of myths and not the other way around. Excuse me. Hope I'm not offending anybody with religious beliefs. But I do keep an open mind, I suppose, is what I'll say. The Lord Leto used it. So control, I think. Precise control. There's a Jim quote for it. I think it's a mechanism for the Bene Gesserit that allows them to exploit certain conditions to their advantage. Yeah, one of the things I often want, we know the goal of the Bene Gesserit breeding program, but which is to create a meal kwisatz Sadarak to open up the other memory of the meal line. It's kind of makes you think that they're trying to create a sort of roots to the first Adam and mitochondrial Eve, this kind of thing. But the question then becomes, to what end? Congratulations, you've got access to all the memories of men and women going back throughout history. Are you going to spend the rest of your days studying, looking backward? Or I suppose that's another maybe way of looking at the thing, that the other memory looks backward, and the prescient thing is all about moving forward. Possibly, I don't know. It does get complicated, June, doesn't it? It can be quite hard to talk about any given subject within these series of books. I think it's some of your questions are very good, by the way. Thank you very much. And I think one of the reasons why I stopped lecturing in computing and information systems is I got absolutely scunnered teaching the same rubbish day in, day out. And what I really enjoy about literature is you can teach a book the same students year in, year out. 100 students will give you 100 different opinions on a book, as it should be. Let's have a wee look. Okay. Lord, I just kind of think. I can see the woke crowd having a problem with the fact that only a male can see both in female memories. That's a good point, randomity. Babs Byro, indeed, using religion, strangely enough, is one of the Bene Gesserit things which pushed me into atheism. Just go back up, randomity. I'm not too sure. I'm in Northern Ireland, and I don't really understand the whole woke movement at the moment, and I get a bit of a gist of it, but my sense of it is if these people have just woke up, I'm not impressed, because I've been wide awake my entire life, and they have been sleeping. If that's the case, I don't think it's a thing to be proud of. If only now you can suddenly see injustice in society, and if that's what woke is, I think there's a lot of it to do with. I think it's very much an American thing. I might be wrong there. But yeah, both male and female memories. Yeah, it's a book's a book. I think I think there's an interest in a lot of people want to rewrite books to suit themselves sometimes these days, and I don't quite understand that. There've been people who've got criticisms of Dune, and you'll find these up in the ecology section when we get there. But they've gone ahead and written their own response to Dune. They've written their own book, and rather than let's censor this, let's delete this, let's do that, let's update it for a modern audience. I think it's quite offensive to any author to try and rewrite their work, especially when they're dead. And if I would say that if you, as a classicist, I study a lot of, most of the people in the ancient world are what you would call monsters, absolute monsters. And if you've got a bit of a weak constitution, you're not going to enjoy reading anything from the ancient world. We shouldn't wipe them out and pretend they don't exist. Sorry, I've gone off a wee bit track there, but you can see, indeed, using religion, leader second got no present tense. Yes, I'm in the US, and woke is running our lives, or is that ruining? Maybe, Ryan. I mean, no state of being in the present. Constantly looking back and forth. Leo acknowledged this place in time and history when he derived deeply into his other memory. Was when he'd lose himself. Yeah, I would say that I don't think that there's a conversation going on in America at the minute that I thought Dune actually had a lot of relevancy to your political situation, but there's quite a bad thing, I think, in the sense of race, whether whichever community, I think, or ethnicity you're from, the word race itself, whether I think it's just it's a bit of a misnomer. And as far as I'm concerned, the only other race of human beings have been extinct for about 15 to 20,000 years. So there's one race of human beings, and I'm not a fan of the whole race argument at all. And a lot of the white imperialist arguments that people bring up break down absolutely where I live. and I mean they just fall to bits quite badly. So I'm often not impressed by the white savior colonial narrative that's coming out of certain academic and journalistic circles at the moment. Um, and sadly, that's just really to do with where I live. But we are the exception to everybody's rule. Um, but at the same time, if people are becoming awake to injustice, maybe that's a good thing, I suppose. But I always want to know why you were so blind to it in the previous sense. I think. I mean, no state of being in the present. Well, it's place and time in history. And the other memory pressing thing is Herbert's love of the Janus theme. Yeah, Janus is very interesting. I can give you another wee bit of Irish, a little bit of Irish lore if you want, and that's to do with the Romans. Is that the Romans never, and this is to do with Janus. Just quickly, the Romans never invaded Ireland, and I think, as evidence suggests, they did send a couple of ships here, but they never returned. So the Romans have no real place in their civilization in effect in Ireland, though obviously their impact upon Britain is massive. But there's a wee island down near Loch Earn called White Island, and on White Island are Janus heads. And good, interesting questions, because they're not really part of the local deity group or anything like that, the local Irish gods and so on. So the question is, how did they get there? And that's quite. I've not actually been to see them, but I think if you look them up, if you look on Wikipedia or something, you should. I think it's called White Island, and it's near Loch Earn, I think. Yes, near Loch Earn. So the Janus theme. Janus is this. January is named for Janus, and it's the forward-facing, two-faced god, basically, and that's a lot to do with on a mythological level. It works very well with the Jungian idea of the syzygy, and that we have an awful lot of male-female pairings in Dune that represent the Jungian archetype of the syzygy. And they're not all male-female either. Some are male-male and some are female-female. But Paul and Alia, for example, are part of that, as are Leto the Second and Ganima. And it is I suppose it's the main thing that I ran with in terms of my thesis, is that I used that motif of Herbert's to show that Dune is not a golden age science fiction book, and also that it's not a new wave science fiction book either. That really Dune is a sort of a bridge, almost a Kwisatz Haderach itself, to science fiction between these two periods. And it's fundamentally a response to the Golden Age, absolutely, and it's a kick at it. And it's not. It has that esoteric and that inner space, if you like, as we talked about earlier, that the new wave so desired. They didn't want their rocket ships and laser beams and atom bombs and all of this stuff. So Dune kind of sits between both worlds, and I think it's a massive influence on the new wave. I think Dune really made a lot of authors sit up and go, "Ooh, wow." There's a few books that do that. Some science, not just for science fiction writers, but some authors just land on the scene and go, "Ooh." And I think if you look at the response by science fiction writers to Gene Wolfe's Book of the New Sun, it was like he'd gone around and smacked them all in the face. That suddenly you realize that you're not such a good writer because look what this has produced, So the Janus themes, the Janus motif in particular, is fundamentally a part of the thesis that Frank Herbert's Dune series is well, the Dune in particular is a bridge between the Golden Age and the new wave of science fiction. The book crowd is up in arms about Paul being the white savior thing. Yeah, I'll tell you what, guys. I was going to do a video all about this because it had pissed me off so much. That fundamentally there's a lot of bias in not just science fiction, academia, and journalism, but it's all out there. Bottom line is this: I decided to evidence this white savior nonsense, and I have all of the Dune books on electronic copies. And I simply just I did multiple word searches and investigated every single instance, believe it or not, of the word white in Dune and the word whites as well, to be thorough. And the fundamental thing is there are no white characters at all in Dune. None. And it's and of course we all know that Paul is not a savior. And there are more than one Messiah. Again, the Pardo kinds, late kinds sort of thing with the Fremen is a bit dodgy as well. But nobody's described as white, and there's a fundamental reason for that. Herbert, in building these books, is there's a concept of working with the monomyth, and the idea to pervade as many multiple cultures and lay down this multiple religious and cultural and mythological layer onto Dune, and have it fundamentally backed up with the historicity and of the Butlerian Jihad gives. And if you actually had that, there's a foundation there. But the whole fact is that Dune's designed to appeal to as big an audience as possible, and particularly with the myth, the use of myth, and I don't believe in the monomyth. I think it's a load of hooey, by the way. But the monomyth is a system that you can apply to studying myth, and it's the main reason I think that Dune appeals to so many people from all around the world. We've had people from Russia, Africa. I've had people from Turkey, South America, all over people all over the world, the Middle East, Israel, all over the world are really invested and love this book. And nobody's skin color is really advertised too much in it. And I think that's what a lot of readers can relate to, is that whenever you read a book, you want to put yourself in a way into it. You want to see something of your own life. I think I don't personally do that too much. I'm not interested in other people's cultures, to be honest, and the more alien the better. So but he's the whole white savior thing is if you want to ask why is there nothing mentioned about the white savior in my PhD, well, there's a very simple reason for that. It didn't exist at the time when I wrote this. There was no such thing as a white savior trope, and it's emerged out of, I believe, journalism a couple of years after I finished my PhD. And I do understand it, but it's no, it's sloppy. You can say this if you like, sloppy research on behalf of a lot of journalists, and I think maybe there's a lot of quite sloppy work and a lot of bias out there. And particularly for me, I think whenever you approach something like this kind of work, your job is everybody brings their own thing to the party, I suppose, but your job is to operate without bias. And as far as I'm concerned, somebody asked me the other day about this kind of thing within academia, and as far as I'm concerned, I said to them, if I can work without bias, why can't they? I have my prejudices and my biases, but so Paul is most definitely not a white savior, and anyone reference their work, show their sources, that do some work, please, I think is what you should be telling these people out there, these journalists and stuff. It's very sloppy, I think, and that's really is. Put it this way, almost everything that I've said in my Dune videos, I've referenced the hell out of everything. There's 520 references. If I've said something here, it's because I've gone and found it out. I've backed it up. I've checked out. I've got other sources. Have I confirmed? Am I speculating? And anything that I can't really back up or prove doesn't go in. So no, the white savior thing. I was even going to comment about the casting of Sharon Duncan Brewster as Leah Kynes, and the discussion that seems to be coming out of Hollywood and the global media on the web is that we've got a gender swap and we've got a race swap, and how will that affect the character? And interestingly, I think it's actually a really, really bad mistake by Denis Villeneuve in turn. Well, it's not Denis Villeneuve's mistake, but it depends on what he wanted to do. So if the race swap, if you want. In other words, have a person with a different coloured skin, if that's what you mean by race. That has no effect on Dune at all, and it makes no difference whatsoever to the story. Gender swapping the character is a big problem, and I think it's to do with the intent of the author. So if there's simply put, if the Dune movie is not going to continue putting out Frank Herbert's message, then it doesn't matter one jot, one bit. However, the real thing is that the character of Lady Kynes is really important to Frank Herbert, and important for a couple of reasons. And he is not a savior either. And if you actually read what the Kynes family do to the Fremen, they're pretty disgusting. They use these people badly and manipulate the hell out of them. But fundamentally, Kynes is wrong about everything, pretty much. And he is I'm your smart guy, I'm your well-educated, Western, white, civilized man who has systems, and I'm going to show you how to do this with systemic thinking. And Kynes is kind of praised a bit because he can look a bit further forward than most people. But by the time you get to Leto II, you know that that kind of long-term thinking is actually not long-term thinking at all in terms of the ecological time frame. So that the real problem for Kynes is that Kynes is absolutely all wrong. He's the reason that the Fremen go to their death for this dream, and it's the dream that his father Pardo made that allows the Atreides to manipulate the Fremen even more. But fundamentally, for Herbert, it's really important that Kynes was killed by his planet, and that point where and he boom away he goes. Kynes is not the ecological poster child that he's supposed to be, or that a lot of people see him as. He's the exact opposite. He's also the warning. And the other thing, I suppose, is that there's in terms of that, the systemic thinking, the Fremen are actually immersed in systems and have to be to live in such a, but they're a different type of systemic thinking. So the thing is, why is Sharon Duncan Brewster a problem then? It's simply this. I believe that the chap who's done this, that decided to write the character this way, to make the character black and female, has done it because of some sort of woke representation thing. Representation wasn't needed in the film. But the problem is this: he's actually scored it's an own goal for feminism by a man. Because who do you blame for all the disasters that ultimately befall the Fremen in Dune, that ultimately their doom is sealed? It's the Kynes family. And they're to blame. So the whole point is, whose fault is everything here? Western man, white man. And now you get to say, this is the real problem for Denis Villeneuve's Dune, in my own opinion, is if you want to continue with that message, you've now blamed black women for everything that happens to the Fremen. And if you understand our mythology and our Adam and Eve and our Pandora and Epimetheus, etc., it's a great thing for the guy to blame the woman perpetually throughout history. And that's why I believe it's an own goal. I don't know what you think about that. But I'm sorry if I went off on one, but I just thought it was kind of interesting. The Fremen. Hollywood is now heavily. So let me just catch up with your opinions here, folks. As a claim of understanding it is only uncertain spoken and ignorance of the word. Eventually caused the extension of the Fremen and their way of life. Yeah, and the thing is, the whole missionary, it's the dream of the ecological dream, is the stage which Paul can also take. Hollywood is heavy now on hitting their quotas. I really know so little about Hollywood these days. It seems like another planet to me. Paul is seen as a messiah to the Fremen, savior because of the Bene Gesserit missionary protector, which is essentially sophisticated propaganda and leads them as people to the abyss. Yeah, good point, Random. It does. It's I think always the people are the victims in Dune, and mostly people we don't get to see. Pardon me. The irony is that dream The Fremen dream for Arrakis carries the seeds of their own destruction. Yeah, and there's another thing that kind of doesn't make too much sense about the Fremen is if they're a nomadic people and they're Zen Sunni wanderers, um, and they didn't stick too long in Seleucus Secundus, I think it's for about 9 generations. Rather than alter a desert planet, I'm assuming that wouldn't it be easier just to move somewhere else? I often get the sense that the Fremen are constantly on the move because of, I think Herbert describes their religion, the Zen Sunni warriors, as an adaptive form of Islam. And I often considered it maybe that it was outside the Orange Catholic Bible and the Commission of Ecumenical Translators and all that stuff. That's kind of why they moved about. But yes, ultimately, it's Paul's the Messiah. But the thing is, with we go to randomity, what we're sort of saying is that if you go to the appendices of Dune, the story begins a good couple of generations before in the appendix, and it's this. If have a look at Pardo and particularly Pardo Kynes, and I think if we get to chapter 4, you'll see, and wherever Pardo pointed, the Fremen went, and the men went, and the women went, and the children went, and they died, but they went. And it is he's happy to kill these people for his ecological dream. And I think if you understand, the other day I discussed is it the Nico McCain definition of politics is that politics is the science of the happiness of man, where the happiness of the individual is subservient to the happiness of the collective. And that's Aristotle. I don't agree with that at all. But that's very much the operation here. You can achieve your dream and use people. And so the people are just, we have an episode on this, just geomorphic agents. The Fremen are just geomorphic agents to the Kynes family, and they even use marriage and breeding to get into these people's good books. Just film in general, they can't have an all-white cast. Absolutely, I agree. And as I said, the skin color it is irrelevant. I think completely irrelevant to the character of Kynes, and I think the skin color of almost any character in the film is irrelevant to the book. Leto II Leto has olive colored skin, and I think my favorite picture of Paul Atreides is the one from the French cover of Dune Messiah. Again, olive skinned with dark hair. I think the skin color I think is I don't know. I don't set much store in that kind of thing. Northern Irish people are not considered white, by the way. So, it makes no difference to the film at all. But just as the gender swap, I think wouldn't make a difference much at all. But it is an own goal in terms of what Herbert's trying to say, and I think it's an own goal against women. To be honest with you, that's the thing. I think you're trying to present the film's trying to present the late Kynes. Color of someone's skin doesn't matter one jot, I think. But the gender, in terms of what this is, men and man, Western man at work, and we're going to blame a woman for it. As I said, it stinks a bit of Adam and Eve and Epimetheus and Pandora and so on. And a lot of I suppose religions shift at a certain point in history from matriarchal to patriarchal, which is a very interesting thing. So is it a good policy for everyone in the industry? Yeah, I got the sense that America was a vast a diaspora of peoples and of all sorts. I always thought that was the selling point of the United States of America, was that you're such a widespread and inclusive society. I think what we're seeing on the news is not really sending that message out these days. I think it's kind of like Western thinking ruins things. Maybe even the anti-white savior or Westernism as a curse. It's interesting as well, because this idea of Western is where do you show me where West and East begins? Was it the Orient and the Occident, or and so forth? Ireland's mythology is very much tied into heading into the West, if you like, and particularly because our invaders always come from the East. But the idea that there's a magical island that supposedly pops up off the coast of Ireland every 7 days called High Brazil, something like that. Excuse me. representation has ruined storytelling. Um, yeah, it's interesting. I think again, Dune's one of those stories where you could cast I don't know how many countries in the world are there, 204 or something like that. Cast somebody from a different country, every single different country. It wouldn't make a difference to the story. I think the interesting thing is that I don't know if you guys think about this. There are no human beings really in Dune at all. Um, and as much as we get people go, oh, I see this, I see that, and the Fremen aren't based on one group of people. They're based on several different groups from different cultures and from different locations around the world. Um, hmm, America, the scattering. The character's gender isn't it's not relevant, but as I said, if you want to play him in the film, I think it's Herbert's message, that Western man. And again, it's not Western women that's been doing this harm for a good few thousand years, if you see what I mean. I think that's the point, Babs, really. But otherwise, no. I mean, in terms of, I think it's a question of where someone's had good intentions, if you see what I mean. As you say, Hollywood representation with the culture that you have there. But I think what it ends up doing is blaming a female for man's problems. That's what the issue I have with it. I don't think that's going forward. Does that make sense? I think it's a step backwards. But it's a nuanced thing, to be honest. Late Kynes character in Dune, and it is again another one of these heroes who is absolutely disastrous uh, for his people, and it's Pardo Kynes, I think, who delivers that warning in the book to Leah that no more terrible disaster can befall your people than they fall into the hands of a hero. So there we go. So it's there've been issues, I think, but there's an awful lot of venom in these things, isn't there? And I don't. I've seen some of this stuff, and it talks about I think there's a lot of a fervor against, I suppose, white people. If you want to stand me next to a white person, you'll see how unwhite I am. They were saying here that we're not white, we're pale. But it's something to me of a previous century, I suppose. Dr. Point is that Kynes turns out to be wrong, and this is person is portrayed as a black woman in the UAE. Yeah, it's more to do with it is actually the religious and mythological issue that I have with it, and otherwise not a bother. I actually think, by the way, I don't know what yourselves think, but to me, one of the standout images of the early marketing of the film was Sharon Duncan Brewster in that picture of her in the still suit in the desert, looking off to, and I just thought, wow, impressive and so striking an image, and absolutely looks the business for a Late Kynes character. So I'm happy enough. I've just wanted to point out that there is an issue there, and that the issue is caused by the intent of what they did. So I really do think that a gentleman Spate, I think, has done this. I think he's kicked himself in the foot. But the advantage is that the most powerful undercover power in Dune, they're all women. Late Kynes didn't need to be a woman. No, he didn't. But he did need to marry. Pardo Kynes needs to marry a Fremen woman to get in with him. No, he didn't. He didn't need to be a woman at all. And I think what you're there's an actual other layer to what you're saying, Eric, is that regardless of the mission area protectiva is sown on the planet, Pardo Kynes lands on that planet 2 generations before Paul Atreides does, and the mission area protectiva seems to be working for him. There's the bit where the Fremen are going to murder Pardo Kynes, and they send out a skilled killer to kill him. And the guy sort of something happens, and he goes, "Remove yourself." And the guy has this character's called Uliet because it's who Liet's named after. And this guy decides, this is a holy moment, and removes himself and kills himself for Pardo's mythological ecological dream. So it's interesting, Eric, that it may be that the missionary protectiva is already in place in Dune, is what actually allows the Kynes family to embed themselves because of these superstitions, if you like. Aqua Baby says, I won't see the film because I'm such a fan of the '84 film. This new doesn't appeal to me, but I think I'm getting something critical of actors getting work because it offends your sensibility about race. I think you should go see it, Aqua Baby. I'll tell you this, I love the 1984 film. It's fantastic. It's a great piece of entertainment, and it's not all singing and dancing, and you can't possibly get Frank Herbert's Dune into those couplers. But it's great fun, and I'll tell you something. Um, the ensemble of actors, even in the smallest of parts in the David Lynch film, is fantastic. You've got real talent there, being given the odd particularly good quote from the film. I think it. I'm keeping an open mind, and I love the film. I love the original. I like the TV series, but and I think there's. I don't know. I've not seen a lot of Denis Villeneuve's films, and it's going to be his vision. But I think there's going to be things that we won't see, things that we won't. Oh, where's that? Or oh no, why has he done this? And it has to be adapted. But I think it'll be a giggle. So don't. I'm not saying do what I tell you to do, Aqua Baby. If you don't want to go see it, don't go see it, mate. But I think it's bad to not let yourself into new experiences. I think. Whoa, goodness, there's a Dune moment, isn't there? Without new experiences, something inside us sleeps and seldom awakens. Aqua Baby, the sleeper must awaken. So there you go. How appropriate. Regarding the new movie, the scale of the sandworm seems to dwarf humans. So how is a human going to steer them? Yeah, that's well, Aqua Baby, you can always change your mind, mate. But if not, don't worry. Uh, I don't know. I'll tell you what. If you want, I'll give you an honest opinion whenever I see it, and because I know a lot of people badmouth the David Lynch film, and I don't see why at all. Um, Dune 84 is a David Lynch film. That says it all. It is a David Lynch film, but it's got a Frank Herbert stamp of approval. To be honest with you, and it's fun, and I actually think they got the retarded atavism of the Butlerian Jihad, the look and the feel of it, very very well done. And I think at the time it didn't go down well because people were expecting far future stuff because of the success of Star Wars films, and big budget science fiction on the big screen changed people's expectations of what they want to see. It's become very much almost an audio visual drug in a sense that you're expecting a certain in the film these days. Yeah, but be your own person, Aqua Baby. And I sincerely hope you just you give it a chance. But if not, not to worry. Um, of the Lynch, even though he disowned it, it was the film that got me into Lynch as a filmmaker. Yeah, I think it's the first film I saw by David Lynch, and I was saying the other night I hadn't seen an awful lot of his films, but I watched a whole bunch of them very, very quickly in succession. I think on video, and Razorhead and The Elephant Man I particularly like. I think Dune, Blue Velvet, and Lost Highway. I think, and that's the last. That's all that I think I've seen. But yeah, it's a pity. It's sad that he didn't. What is a pity is I think that David Lynch didn't take that film, and it's probably a matter of because of the time. But a lot of films can be remastered and reworked if the director's given the creative control. Uh, exposing the soft under scales of worm stays. Well, Babs is giving a bit of technical info there. Yeah, absolutely. They irritate the worms and you hang on, and then as they roll up, you go with them. And June Doc, you've got to admit that June '84 was a big disappointment. I can't admit that because I was 11 years old randomly whenever that came out, and nothing. I don't know. You see, I would watch old black and white Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon things from the serials from the 30s and 40s because I was brought up on them, and I was brought up with a black and white TV for a while. So old sci-fi, old special effects doesn't bother me. And no, it was really outside of my experience. So I was blissfully unaware of Frank Herbert and Dune, and I think I was the sort of kid that you could get sticker albums those days and try to collect the Dune sticker album, and got a few bubblegum cards, probably with 2000 AD. I'd imagine they tended to do features on these kind of things. And yeah, I did enjoy it. Thought it was a bit odd, but then came back to it. As Bob says, that it grew on me with multiple views. But I absolutely, I watch it all the time. If June's on, I sit and watch it. And yeah, it's an excellent. It's just got an awful lot of exposition, but the whole it's on many levels a great fun film. I think I was saying I think they should do something with David Lynch's Dune that they did with the Rocky Horror Picture Show. You know, get everybody to dress up in their still sits or dress up for and go and see it in a cinema and make it. You know, take cinnamon and pour it all over yourself so everything smells of melange, and have one of those kind of fun interactive events. I think that would be a giggle. But and it is high camp as well. It's got that feel, which is what Frank Herbert wanted. Um, there's a big mess with the weirding modules and the deluge at the end. Yeah, the deluge at the end. But again, if you don't know Dune, you go, that kind of makes sense. And the whole regardless of again, I think he's trying to do something there. The weirding modules, I thought, is a fantastic idea. And we all know the weirding way is a martial art developed by the Bene Gesserit. But this thing that David Lynch and the explanation of some, you know, the Paul Atreides gives, and I absolutely think it was fantastic. So I know the weirding modules aren't what you're expecting from June. There's a few different wee things, but it was absolutely cracker. We even have actresses, is it like Linda Hunt as Charlotte Mapes? You know, there's and I think it's very over the top and in a really good way. Um, Set the franchise back 30 years. It could well have done, yeah. Um, but at the same time, yeah, you see, I think a lot of Dune though is as much as the first Dune book's quite filmable, and the way the TV series handled things, I thought was quite good. I think actually a lot of the content of Dune would not make good films, as in that their place would be in the cinema. I think um, they're too detailed. I think the first, again, even Denis Villeneuve's not been able to do one Dune movie, and I think cinema has limitations, and the main limitation that cinema has is the human bladder. And I actually went to see the most recent Star Wars films. The first one was it Star Wars: Force Awakens, and being in my late 40s, I had to go to the toilet, and I went to the loo. And would you believe every critical bit of information that happened in that film happened at the point where I went to the loo, and I had no idea what was going on. And I ended up having to go home and download the film to figure out what I'd missed. And literally the 3 minutes I was gone. So I have a real problem with cinemas not having breaks in the middle of long films. And I never got to see Denis Villeneuve's Blade Runner 2049 at the cinema, and I was going to go see it here, but it appeared and went so fast that I wasn't able to. Um, yeah, it's a good chance. I think it did come across as a bit too weird, though. Randomity setting the Dune fandom and setting the franchise back 30 years. Love the film. What have we got here? Angry Baby says, I love the film, but adaptations are more like reconstructions, weirding modules and voice or inventions that work with film but aren't in the book. Yeah, well, the voices in the book, I suppose, the way the weirding modules work with the. But I still thought it was a great, very, as you say, very inventive, and to come up with that actually outside of the experience of Frank Herbert's book, I thought was really good of David Lynch, and it showed good science fiction sensibilities. Sean Young to Zendaya. I thought again, Sean Young was doing the rounds with these kind of films at the time, and Rachel and Blade Runner as well, and I thought she was very good. In folks do. I read the series before a prequels. Thank you, phone. That was my phone. Excuse me, I've got a message coming in, but it's probably getting a bit late here, folks. As much as I'm enjoying that, bear with me. Yes, indeed. Well, I'll tell you what, folks. That will do for tonight. As usual, I've stuck on a lot longer here. Oh, that was Holly Dolly just went past there. That was my dog. But we'll be back again. We're going to decide to do this every night after these videos. So as a good way of interacting with the videos, a few of them are only a few minutes long as well. So it's been very nice chatting to you. Sorry we got a bit fuddled up with the connection at the start, but we'll be here each night after these videos all the way up to the 21st of this month before June comes out. Yeah, so it's been interesting. This is it does give me a wee opportunity to comment on the different videos that we're doing, and it's been enormous fun. It's a bit like being a lecturer again. I'm quite enjoying this. If any of you guys have questions or conversation to pointers or anything at all, have a wee think for tomorrow. Tomorrow's episode is going to go on with the Samuel Butler. It really will look at, this is the episode that looks really in depth at what we were saying to Babs, the 5 points of absolute identity between Dune and Erewhon. So have a wee look at that. It's quite interesting. A lot to do with the onborn, preborn stuff that you were talking about tonight. Should look to be faithful to the text. I'll say this, by the way, guys. I think no film has ever been faithful to a text ever, and I think it's not possible. The only thing that possibly comes close is maybe something like the 300, where you're making a film out of a graphic novel where you actually have frames and images. But I think, for example, Blade Runner, the original Blade Runner, is an animal all on its own, and The Android's Dream of Electric Sheep is an animal all on its own. And I think actually the title for Blade Runner just the title alone was lifted from something to do with William Burroughs. But I think Blade Runner is a great example of two completely different animals out of the same work. And but no film will ever be as it's just not possible. They're two completely different mediums, and I think we're always going to be immersed more in a book because it's so personal, and we absorb stuff like that. But the films can lead you to books, and books can lead you to films, and science fiction is our mediums that we have today are so many. Science fiction has grown out of just the paper, book or story. Ghost in the Shell, same reason. The new Ghost in the Shell was interesting. The original manga is a masterpiece, and I didn't think it was particularly good. There's a lot of Ghost in the Shell stuff out there, though. There's TV series, and a lot of it is excellent. Standalone Complex is really, really good. But anyway, listen, guys, I'll have to wrap it up for tonight because it's late here, and my son and wife are in bed and they've got to get up for work. So we'll see you all hopefully tomorrow evening after the episode, and thank you very much for joining us, and all the very best. Look after yourselves. Good night.